Welcome to Moon and Fire. I'm Emily Bailey, founder of Whole and Wild, where I guide women back to their sacred wisdom through ritual and cyclical living. This is a podcast for women ready to remember their sacred cycles, reclaim their radiant fire, and unleash their intuitive magic. Today, I'm honored to be in conversation with Carolina Forman, who brings profound wisdom around body liberation and what she beautifully describes as the sacred nature of our hunger. What I find so powerful about Carolina's work is how she connects our relationship with food and our bodies to larger systems of oppression, helping women reclaim their right to trust their own hunger and honor their body's wisdom. Carolina's message that your hunger is holy feels especially relevant in our Moon and Fire community, where we're exploring what it means to trust our cyclical nature and honor our body's intelligence. Her work on disentangling from diet culture connects deeply to the larger journey of reclaiming our feminine wisdom and trusting our inner knowing. Carolina, thank you so much for joining me in this sacred space today.
Thank you so much, and thank you for that introduction. I feel very understood.
I really am inspired by the work that you've done in this area because I think it's such a, right, like it's an ordinary thing, right? We eat
Yeah,
all the
so
time. And
basic.
and I think for me, my favorite things in life are when we take the ordinary and we look at them a little bit better and
Hmm.
we notice how they're actually sacred,
Hmm.
or we can access the sacred within them, I guess.
Yeah,
So to
yeah,
me, this is just like a really special topic.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So I'd love to start by hearing about your journey into body liberation work. What called
yeah,
you to focus on helping women reconnect with their hunger and disentangle from diet culture?
yeah. Well, I think so. Like many, many, many women, I grew up very, very surrounded by diet culture, right? My mom was always on a million different diets. I first went on a diet when I was in like fifth grade, and I
Mm.
was, I wear straight sizes. Um, and at that time of my life, I was even more so like very average bodied child. And so I do come at this from a place of like there is some privilege in having a body that is um I won't say that my body is perfectly in line with what the ideal standards of society are, because I know whose body is, but a body that is more aligned with what society deems acceptable, with a
Right.
smaller body. Um, yeah, so fifth grade, my first diet was yeah, I did the Atkins diet, and I just remember being just so and then I remember this moment when I think the first moment when I realized like, oh, this was like a this like it's important for women to be on diets.
Mm.
Was my friend was we were at our church, and we had some like thing going on, and they were having donuts beforehand, and she was like, oh, I couldn't have a donut. I love donuts, especially the Boston cream donuts, but
Mm.
like I feel like I'm short, and so they just go straight to it like you can see it right away. And I was like, oh, so like I shouldn't have like I want another donut. Like I probably feels embarrassing all of a sudden. Something has shifted within me
Mm.
where I no longer, even though I was like, oh yeah, I'm seeing my mom, diet. I'm seeing all those women in my life kind of constantly dieting. Something just shifted within me where I was like, oh, I am actually included in that now. I am not.
Mm.
And yeah, and so for years and years, I dieted. I developed for a brief period of time. I developed some disordered eating,
Mm.
um, and um, I think very gratefully, um, I it's not that like it just went away on its own, but in some ways it kind of did. I don't think that's everybody's experience. I'm very, very grateful for that. I think that I had just some very helpful things in my life that kind of helped me kind of move through. And it wasn't at first, it wasn't this thing where I was like really like carrying out these ideas. I was just like, well, screw it. Like I can't worry about I'm not gonna get this stressed out about this anymore. Like I'm just gonna let it go a little bit. I'm just too overwhelmed. I just can't worry about it. And I remember
Mm,
hearing about this idea called intuitive eating, which is this idea that you don't uh, have to restrict your food, and that that's not a necessary thing, that we can actually trust our bodies to tell us when we're hungry and to tell us when we're full.
mm,
Um, that we can return to these cues that our body gives us and that we can just nourish ourselves and that it doesn't have to be complicated. And um, even that we don't have to actually have perfection in our nutrition. Um,
mm,
and that led me like on a journey. Um, I became a therapist and I found I loved working with folks with eating disorders. And even and then beyond that, like it just kind of erupted into this wider world when we get talking about like, oh my goodness, we have all these kind of really oppressive things that we put on bodies only as a society. Only certain bodies are acceptable and certain bodies are unacceptable. I think there's a fascinating history of where that came from. If you're interested in the history, there's a book by Sabrina Strings called Fearing the Black Body that
mm.
is some just really interesting ways of the ways that the thin ideal was created. Also
Yeah.
goes back to like tuberculosis, like the tuberculosis
Wow.
patients who are, sorry, I'm gonna make this really fast, but like
No,
tuberculosis
this is
patients are like,
fascinating.
pale and like red-faced and very, very like gaunt and thin, and that but like tuberculosis is like a sexy disease. It was like the artist's disease. So eventually like tuberculosis started forming beauty ideals. While, meantime, like there was also layers of like thinness was associated with whiteness and thinness was associated with like a different kind of morality. That wasn't really always the case historically, but whatever the case, we inherited this, yeah, thin bodies are the right bodies idea,
Mm.
which is this really moralizing idea around food, around bodies. And wow, detangling from that can really, really bring a lot of freedom to ourselves and to others. And that just gets me really excited.
Ah,
And so
wow.
I'm a therapist now. Yeah, I'm a therapist now, LMHC. And yeah, I work with folks who want to detangle all that.
Ah, that's so powerful. Isn't that so fascinating when you look into the origins and find that the stereotypical picture of beauty that we are
Hmm.
handed in the modern world came
Hmm.
from a disease. I mean, and et cetera. Like, right, there's all
Yeah,
kinds of factors there, but just it's yeah, that's fascinating. Thank you for sharing
yeah,
that.
yeah, of
I'm
course. Yeah.
curious, in your questionnaire that I sent you, you had shared a beautiful story about nursing your baby late one night and feeling
Yeah,
incredibly powerful. Can you share more about how that moment shifted your understanding about your body's wisdom and power?
yeah. Yes, I have a baby. He's currently 9 months. He's very, very cute. Doesn't
Mm.
always sleep. It was one of those nights where he wasn't sleeping. I was just, honestly, at first I was just so freaking frustrated. I was tired. Um, and I also just kind of had this moment of feeling like, oh my goodness, like what is my body doing? Like what my body doing right now? Like it's like making milk out of the stuff I ate for lunch and the stuff I had as a snack. And it was just wild to me. And I had this just moment of like just like the absurdity of contrasting like there is this powerful thing. Like I'm nurturing and creating life with my body because of nourishing myself, like because I ate. Like wouldn't happen if I didn't eat. Like that really wouldn't happen. That like just like the gall of anyone to like
Mm,
and myself even like in other times like to question my right um or anyone's right to nourish. It just felt
mm.
like this is the most powerful thing ever that's happening right now.
Thank you for sharing that. That's so powerful. I'm also breastfeeding right now still, and
Yeah.
um, yeah, it is. It's striking, right? Because
Yeah.
like you hear a lot about how like potent and uh yeah, just nutritive the
Hmm.
breast milk is,
Breast milk is.
and I have no idea what to put in it, right? Like it's
Hmm.
not like this conscious
Yeah.
process, but it's so um miraculous. And I think one of the things that I even hear inside your story is awe as a
Yeah.
gateway. Sometimes I think the sacred surprises us because it reminds us that we don't have to have
Mm-hmm.
everything planned out.
Mm-hmm.
Or earlier you even mentioned like, oh, you don't have to have perfect nutrition, right? Like there's so much education out there in advertisements everywhere that
Mm-hmm.
says, well, you can never, even like I was talking to my mom yesterday and she's like, well, you can never have too much vitamin D. And I'm like, oh yeah, vitamin D, right? Like I
You
forget
actually can. You can get vitamin D toxicity. It's really hard,
right.
and you probably don't have vitamin D toxicity, but you're probably not even close to it. But yeah, but you can. Yeah, there is.
Right, right.
Yeah,
But there's so much I think should out there, right? Like that's
yeah,
something else you brought up is this concept of should. And I'd love to go there too. I think if we kind of want to get into some of the core message here, like one of the things
yeah,
you talked about was if you could communicate a core message, it would be that your hunger is holy, which is so powerful and revolutionary in a culture that teaches women to distrust their appetite.
yeah.
And I think what we are just talking about there with the shoulds, like there's so much should out there about, well, you should be getting this much of this and you
Hmm.
should not be getting this,
Yeah,
all the different types of fats and the different, like, there's so much. Could you help our listeners really understand
yes,
what you mean by this and
yeah,
why reclaiming the sacredness of hunger is so important?
yeah, yes, yeah. So I think there's like two things, like there's like two like paths that my brain is kind of forming as I'm like answering that question. And one of them is like kind of the more spiritual, a little bit esoteric thing of like your hunger is holy and like honoring that in a society that tells you that your hunger is bad and you should suppress it and restrict your nourishment, like that is revolutionary. I really fully believe that. And I think that there's a practical piece of like, where did you get that information from that um, that tells you anything of the opposite? And I think that's like the information, like the core of diet culture is this idea that weight loss at any cost is good and valuable and
Mm,
necessary, almost always, until all of a sudden it's not. But um, but weight loss at any cost. So I mentioned this earlier, the idea of intuitive eating. It's also a framework that I use in my practice as a therapist, working with folks with with eating disorders. Intuitive eating is this framework that was created by Evelyn Tribole and Elise Resch, doctors and they're dietitians, registered dietitians. At the core of it, it questions this weight loss at any cost paradigm. Um, and actually questions. There's also some really interesting research from Linda Bacon, also on health at every size, of just this idea that like we actually can't see health in body size. So when we look at the research, we have this idea that that being in a larger body equals bad health outcomes, and that's a terrible thing. Um, and when we look at the research, there's a lot more nuance. We see that health behaviors um, do have some correlations with health outcomes, but that it is not this kind of black and white picture that would be really nice and convenient if it was in some ways. Like it'd be really convenient if that was true, but it just isn't. We actually see that weight loss efforts are associated with negative health outcomes. Strangely enough, we see people that are in the overweight category. So according to the BMI, which I do not like the BMI, if that's any surprise to you, but according to the BMI category, people that are in the overweight category actually have the lowest rates of mortality in any cause.
mm,
There's lots of stats like that that kind of bring a little bit of question. And intuitive eating does suggest that like yeah, sure, of course we do benefit from a varied diet. We do benefit from movement, um, but dieting seems to have failed. Um, 95% of people who go on a diet within 5 years actually gain more weight.
mm,
Um, and what seems to be an alternative is instead is reconnecting with the sensations of hunger and fullness, and honoring those.
Mm.
Um,
Can we pause for a second? That just
yeah.
feels like that statement feels so sacred to me.
Mm,
Like I'm actually tearing up a little bit in hearing you say
mm,
it. Yeah,
mm,
reconnecting with the sensations of hunger and fullness. Is that what you said?
yeah,
And then honoring those, learning
yeah,
to honor those. Oh,
yeah,
thank you.
yeah. And I just in my work in my own life really early on when I kind of first discovered this, but definitely in my work working with other people, what I think people end up hearing when they hear this is, oh well, this is like the hunger and fullness diet,
Mm,
and part of that is like the truth is that intuitive eaters, people who score higher on measures of intuitive eating, tend to have slightly lower body mass than people who have who don't sometimes. Um, and so I think people end up hearing like, "Oh, this is the hunger fullness diet," right? And that's not true. Um, if anything, intuitive eating is about releasing. We're just going to nourish, and what
mm,
happens happens. Um,
mm.
um,
I love that.
yeah. Uh, and I'll talk a little bit more about intuitive eating, some details about it, as I do want to make sure that there are some like misconceptions about it, and I do want to just kind of clarify those. But if first, if we're talking about this hunger and fullness piece, what I often find when I work with people is they're very, very quick to um, like, all right, I want to accept my feelings of fullness. I wanna know when it's time to stop.
Mm,
But accepting your feelings of hunger, that's usually the part that's scary for a lot of people.
mm.
Um, and making room for that and thinking like actually I want to accept those sensations, it feels difficult.
Yeah.
um, Even for folks who are binge eating, a lot of times they might I've often found like they might come and they might say like actually I do want to, I don't really have issues with not eating. Um, and what we kind of end up almost, I haven't encountered a case where we haven't found some kind of like, even like just like mental restriction of this like strong shoulds and kind of the way we're reacting against the shoulds, um, which lines up with kind of the findings of intuitive eating that binging, restricting creates desire to overeat, which some ways fuels kind of that pattern that we've seen of like kind of weight becoming unstable and increasing over time, just because we're
Overcompensating.
feeding this binge restrict cycle.
Yeah.
And I also want to realize weight does change over time. That's a normal thing.
Yeah, um I'm drawn to I want to get into
Yeah.
the details around intuitive eating as well because I think that the fact that there is a framework out there that
Yeah.
is researched and well written about
Mm-hmm.
and practiced is
Mm-hmm.
really, really a gift. And also, before we jump into that, something that really stood out to me is the trust that is required
Mm-hmm.
when you
Mm-hmm.
make this shift. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that that lines up with so many things that um, I talk about on this podcast with Moon and Fire around when, the messaging in our culture around almost everything,
Mm-hmm.
um, like productivity and the need to be constantly doing, well, trusting your cycles comes against that belief and says
Mm-hmm.
like, well, what if you trusted that resting
Mm-hmm.
would actually create life rather than take away life from
Yeah.
your your home or your work situation, right? In the same way, I just hear that here too. Like, well, what would it look like? I hear the invitation inside of this, right? Like, what would it look like for you to choose, even to be curious? If you can't trust, like, what if you just were curious to see how allowing hunger and fullness to be um like welcomed and I love it what you said, honored. What if we could deepen into the possibility that those might actually lead us somewhere good as
Mm.
opposed to
Yeah.
this overarching message that they we can't trust them, right? That's just, it's really
Hmm.
powerful to hear that.
Yeah. 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 And I think I just want to be really clear. I didn't hear what you're saying, but a misconception that shows up so much is that people get so focused on weight and weight loss that still intuitive eating is like a, oh, well, if I do this, then I probably will have weight loss. And
Mm.
actually, that's not necessarily the case. Your weight might go up, it might go down,
Yeah,
right? Like,
exactly.
because your weight's probably going to change throughout your
Mm.
life. And it's
Yeah.
possible that nourishing yourself could mean weight gain. And
Mm-hmm.
that might feel really scary.
Yes.
However, I want to like F it. Like you might. Yeah, you could. Like it's possible that you would gain weight. Like F it. Like it's we're just gonna let the body do what the body needs to do. But
Mm.
what do you gain by if you are a person, which many women are, but and if that is you, that is kind of living in this world where you're kind of holding on space, thinking about like what's good, what am I eating, what am I not eating? Am I feeling guilty about my meals? Am I planning my meals? Am I feeling anxious about gathering with others because of meals? What do you release? What do
Mm.
you gain by just releasing that?
That's so
And
good.
what could be enjoyed by what could be discovered by enjoying eating by letting yourself fully just dive into um, nourishment and even movement.
Mm. That's so good. Again, I'm raising like he's almost 2 year old now, and
Hmm.
just thinking about like his children's eating is
Yeah,
there's a lot of shoulds around it out there too, and I
yeah,
think just like the that's kind of where I've landed, but I hadn't necessarily named it as that until this moment. I think I want to choose that deliberately going forward, which is yes, I'm going to offer him
hmm,
varieties of
yeah,
options so that he can learn what he likes and what he doesn't like. And also, like, it's okay if it doesn't look the way that, the complete nutrition of a 1.5 year
mm,
old is outlined in this PDF I received, like, and
hmm,
like,
yeah,
okay, he's receiving, if he didn't like that category, like, I just think there's a lot of permission there, even as someone who is responsible for another human being's eating at the moment,
yeah,
like to just allow him to find his hunger and fullness cues
hmm,
and his likes and dislikes, and yeah, just trusting his uh,
hmm,
already present wisdom,
hmm,
even at
hmm,
a year and a half, right?
yeah,
um because I deeply believe he was born creative and resourceful and capable, and
yeah,
I get to partner with him in that
yeah,
from this posture, as opposed to, you know, you better eat that, right? Like
yeah,
there's just such a different posture in that.
yeah. And like I think something that you're describing is really valuable is your role is to offer food and to offer variety.
Mm,
Um, and and his role is to decide to eat it and decide what he's going to eat and how much, or really if he's going to eat how much.
yeah.
Yeah, this feels
Mm,
almost like a good segue into the 10 principles of intuitive eating, which I'll just kind of go through.
perfect. Let's do it.
And then, but something you said reminds me of the last principle. Um, but yeah, they're like first the one is to reject diet culture, then to honor your hunger. Principle three is to make peace with food. And
Mm,
four, discover the satisfaction factor. Five is to feel our fullness, then to challenge the food police. Seven is to cope with our emotions with kindness. And that can mean learning additional ways if either binging or restricting has brought you kind of emotional comfort in the past. Learn some new
mm,
strategies. Number
yeah.
eight is to respect our bodies as they are. Nine is to enjoy movement, feel the difference. And the final principle is to honor your health with gentle nutrition. Um,
Mm,
I think oftentimes um, when people are doing this kind of work of kind of like decoupling from this um, kind of diet culture world, whether it's from feeding, shows up kind of feeding themselves and feeding their kids, it's still so easy to. There's this anxiety that you maybe get about like, are we getting enough of this nutrient? And it's actually not that there's never a time and a place. Like I mentioned, like I'm breastfeeding right now, right? Um, I have been really intentional about trying to get in calcium, and it takes a formal like sometimes I have to think about it a little bit. Be like, oh,
Mm,
like, are there enough calcium source? Like, I might need to add a little bit more. Um, uh, just because, like I think I was not getting enough for a little bit, right? And like, so I'm really trying to like make sure that I'm adding some calcium. And it's really hard to do gentle nutrition, kind of this principle of like, we can, yeah, sometimes toddlers need variety. Sometimes they also like benefit from having some fiber and some vitamins you might find in fruits and vegetables. But we can't do that from a place where we're making that diet culture place. That's a really
mm,
different source, and we're making peace with food, and we haven't honored our hunger.
mm.
It's really different. It hits different.
Yeah. What would you suggest as a first step for someone who realizes that they've become disconnected from their hunger cue
Yeah,
or their body wisdom?
yeah,
How might someone begin this reconnection
yeah.
process?
So I think for everybody, it's going to look really different because there's a million ways in which we become disconnected. I think that a really good step is to just first just become conscious of where you are,
Mm,
and just accept that it is unusual for someone to grow up in this cultural landscape and not absorb, um, to some degree, these kind of principles of kind of fat phobia, of um, I could talk more about this a little later, but this idea of like healthism as kind of like healthy is health is good and you have to have health, and if not, it's bad, and you have to care about health all the time. Like,
mm,
um, uh, to not absorb these principles, this moralizing things around food and bodies. Of course, you probably have absorbed it. Some people internalize it deeper. Some people internalize it less deep. Your own, like who you were around, is going to have shaped that. But you might have absorbed it. It's possible. It's a strong possibility. And that's okay. That's fine. Let's just get conscious about where we are. Um, and I think that a good way to do that in exercise, especially if you're a journaler, is for like a week or two. Um, Keep an emotional journal about food. Not a
mm,
food journal, not like a, no, 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 none of this. Like, I ate for lunch, I had this kind of sandwich with this side of this. Like, none of that. But let's take a look at like what did you eat, and what was the emotion that came up. So
mm,
maybe that was, I had a cupcake as a snack, and then I felt just guilty. I remembered like what memories came up.
mm,
I enjoyed it, or I felt like I couldn't stop, or I liked it and moved on. It wasn't that deep. Or maybe actually I tried it and it wasn't that good, but I felt like I had to eat it because I was letting myself have a cupcake right then, so I needed to enjoy it.
mm.
Um, just journal that, observe it.
Yeah.
And then maybe later notice, oh, I had a salmon salad and I felt so good. I felt like I wanted to take a picture of it. Notice that.
Mm,
Notice the morals that we're putting on around food, um, and just get curious.
mm. That's so good.
Yeah. And I think if you're at a place where you have a little bit more permission and you kind of having to work through some of it, I think that really, like, the end of the day, the rituals around like how do we make nourishment rituals like enhance nourishment, honestly, at the end of the day, it's not that deep. It's not that complicated. Um, it's because just eat, but it's become so difficult because of all this
Mm,
programming. But what would it be like to just connect with your cultural traditions around food, to your family experiences, to rich memories that you have around food, um, and just discover the play and the enjoyment and the pleasure.
mm. Ah, that's so beautiful. I think there's something you've said the word liberation a few times, and
Hmm.
that's what I'm here as I listen to you speak about it. And it's uh I love the how accessible this is because I think right, it's not you don't need to actually go educate yourself on anything, right? You don't need to necessarily go buy a book to do this.
Hmm.
It's because it's not a diet, right? You
No,
don't,
yep.
but I love how you
Although I will make a plug for you if you'd like to know more.
yeah.
The Intuitive Eating by Evelyn Trivoli and Elise Resch is a really great place to kind of give yourself, like there's a lot there that I think
Mm.
can be a really helpful resource. But you
Yeah,
don't need a book. You don't need the book. You can just eat. Just listen to the hunger.
yeah. Well, and I think that's the gift though, right? Is like there is actually just as much as we're surrounded by other people who have been deeply habited into this
Hmm.
cultural
Yeah.
way of perceiving food and eating, in the same way, like we can find community surrounding
Hmm. Yeah.
this framework of intuitive eating in the book that you're speaking of, and you, I mean, I want to at the end of the our time together, I definitely want to invite people
Sure.
to connect with you if they're curious about more as well. But for this concept of liberation, I I I want to actually just ask you that question. And again, I know that it will be unique to each person, but if you could take a moment to just tease out some possibilities,
Yeah.
like what becomes possible for women when they truly embrace that their hunger is holy
Mm.
and begin to trust their body's wisdom again.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think to answer that, I think I maybe just want to zoom out and look at like the systems that are.
Mm,
What is the fruit of what's growing from that
mm,
system right now? And what's growing from that system is that only certain bodies are acceptable, worthy, or better. Um, certain bodies are seen as good. Uh, and it goes even beyond body size, it even goes to like beauty and attractiveness um, and what looks like visible health, which is not that useful of information. But uh, certain bodies held up, other bodies denigrated and really oppressed, marginalized, not really allowed, not really encouraged to have the full um, experience and inclusion in society
mm,
in a million different ways. Um, and our bodies, in many ways, in their body size, in the colors of our skin, in our appearance, in our health status, in so many ways. Um, many of our bodies don't measure up. And so we kind of live um, as if there is something like fundamentally unworthy about us. And
mm,
more so for folks who are people of color, for folks who are queer, for folks whose bodies in different ways just do not align with the dominant norms. And so, what happens when you say, you know what? I'm actually going to find gentleness and love in myself, for myself, as
mm,
I am, not in spite of. This is not like this body positivity thing of like, I am beautiful even though I'm curvy. Like, no, I'm just going to accept my body. And I'm not going to accept my body because I'm beautiful. I'm just going to accept my body because my body is worthy.
mm,
Maybe it's beautiful, maybe it's not, but it's a worthy body.
mm,
Who cares about how it measures up? It's a
mm,
worthy, good body. And that starts to give people permission and it starts to kind of reduce the power that exists in all these different spaces to say this body is not worthy, this body is not good. And that I think really has just a lot of power. There's a book that I love, The Body is Not an Apology, The Power of Radical
mm.
Self-Love, and it's by Sonia Renee Taylor. If this is resonating for you, this might also be kind of a great place to go.
Yeah.
But it's a concept that she talks about this idea that like learning to kind of speak the language of um, radical radical body acceptance
Yeah.
um, is almost like learning to speak another language. Like if
Mm,
you today moved to France, fell in love, started a family in France, you have a wonderful family here. But let's pretend that that wasn't the case, and you know, and let's say that on day one you didn't speak any French, you only spoke English. You probably would have a really tough time at the beginning. But let's say you've been there for 30, 40, 50 years. You have grandchildren now, French little grandbabies. Uh, you probably speak French pretty well. In fact, let's say that you never even spoke English throughout the day. You might still have dreams in English.
Mm,
And it's the same way. It's not that, same way here. It's not that your automatic thoughts from growing in this culture will be eradicated. Your automatic thoughts that are critical of bodies and of your body and others' body. They won't be. Probably not. You're always going to speak English. But you can speak French. You can speak this body, this language of um, radical self-love that,
mm,
and from that place, like you can be part of the liberation of others as well.
mm. Carolina, thank you so much for that metaphor. That
Yeah.
is so, yeah,
Thank
unique.
you, Sonia Renee Taylor. It's not a metaphor. I wish it was
Yeah.
because it's brilliant.
Thank you for sharing that. I love
Yeah,
that.
of course.
Yeah, there's just so much permission inside of that to be exactly where you are and
Hmm.
also use the resources available and also trust that um, nothing needs to change, right?
Hmm.
Like as you are worthy. I love that, what you said. Yeah, thank you. Carolina, where can our listeners connect with you
Yeah.
and either learn more about your work around body liberation and intuitive eating, or even reach
Hmm.
out to you for therapy
Yeah.
if they're interested?
Yeah. So I have a therapy practice and I would love to connect with people there through that. You can reach me at my email address, which is carolinaforman@gmail.com. CarolinaForman. It's kind of a mouthful, at gmail.com. And you can also find me on Psychology Today.
Love that. Yeah, and I'll put that in the show notes as well for
Yeah.
today's episode. Thank you so much for bringing this
Yeah.
essential medicine to our Moon and Fire community today. Your reminder that hunger is holy and that reconnecting with our body's wisdom is part of living in rhythm with our highest selves feels like such an important work for women reclaiming their power. I'm
Mm.
really grateful for your courage in challenging these oppressive systems and helping women remember the sacredness of their own bodies and appetites.
Yeah.
Remember the sacred cycles, reclaim your radiant fire, unleash your intuitive magic. Thank you so much for being here, sacred woman. Until next time.